Princess Louise? Marie Amélie of Belgium lived a life that encapsulated the contradictions of European royalty in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. A world of opulent palaces, strategic alliances, and personal freedoms constantly curtailed by duty and tradition. Born on February 18, 1858, as the eldest daughter of King Leopold II and Queen Marie Henriette, she navigated a path filled with familial disappointments, forced unions, passionate rebellions, and profound hardships. Her story is one of defiance against the rigid structures that defined her existence, marked by emotional turmoil, scandalous choices, and an unyielding quest for autonomy. Despite the privileges of her birth, Louise endured isolation, betrayal, and institutional confinement, emerging as a figure who challenged societal norms and exposed the hypocrisies of royal life. Her experiences offer deep insights into the psychological toll of privilege, the complexities of love in a constrained world, and the enduring human desire for self-determination. This narrative explores her journey chronologically, delving into the personal struggles and broader implications that made her a symbol of resilience amid adversity. Early life and childhood, 1858 to 1875, a foundation of isolation and loss. Belgium emerged as a young kingdom in the mid-19th century, following its independence from the Netherlands in 1830. This new nation relied heavily on strategic diplomacy and alliances to establish stability, with the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha playing a central role in its monarchy. King Leopold I, the first ruler, focused on consolidating power through international recognition and economic development, creating a foundation of constitutional governance. However, his successor, Leopold II, who took the throne in 1865, shifted priorities toward aggressive expansionism. Leopold II's reign became synonymous with controversy, particularly his personal control over the Congo Free State, where exploitation and atrocities for rubber and ivory extraction drew international criticism. This imperial focus often overshadowed domestic matters, including family life, as the king invested more energy in colonial ventures than in fostering personal relationships within his household. Leopold II's marriage to Archduchess Marie Henriette of Austria exemplified the political calculations typical of royal unions during this era. Arranged in 1853 to strengthen ties between Belgium and the Habsburg Empire, the match proved deeply incompatible from the outset. Marie Henriette, born in 1836 with Hungarian heritage, possessed a lively and passionate temperament. She found joy in equestrian activities, musical pursuits, and the outdoors, which contrasted sharply with her husband's detached and methodical demeanor. Leopold II, born in 1835, prioritized statecraft and ambition, viewing emotions as secondary to duty. Their life at the royal palace in Brussels mirrored this mismatch. The opulent setting housed a family dynamic marked by formality and emotional distance. Children in this environment were primarily regarded as instruments for dynastic continuity, expected to embody royal obligations rather than receive unconditional affection, which contributed to a pervasive sense of isolation among them. Princess Louise Marie Amélie entered this strained world on February 18, 1858, as the couple's first child after 4 years of marriage. Her birth, while a milestone, elicited disappointment from her parents, who had hoped for a male heir to secure the throne under Belgium's Salic law, which barred women from succession. This gender-based restriction left the monarchy's future uncertain, amplifying tensions within the family. Louise was named in honor of her paternal grandmother, Queen Louise of Orleans, who had been the second wife of Leopold the First and a figure of elegance in French royal circles. From her earliest days, Louise's physical traits drew mixed commentary from her father, who noted in a letter her large dark eyes, alongside a regrettable resemblance to his own prominent nose, describing it as worthy of mine in every respect. Such observations underscored Leopold II's critical eye, blending faint pride with regret over her inability to fulfill succession expectations. Growing up, Louise encountered the full extent of her family's emotional detachment. Leopold II functioned more as a sovereign than a parent, offering only sporadic and superficial displays of affection that inspired fear and respect rather than closeness in his children. He maintained a strict hierarchy where interactions were formal and infrequent, reinforcing a sense of awe that bordered on intimidation. Marie Henriette, though comparatively warmer, was consumed by her own marital frustrations and personal interests, channeling energy into her stables and enforcing rigorous religious practices on her children. This maternal approach, while intended to provide structure, often felt oppressive, blending sporadic tenderness with demands for piety and obedience. Louise's education, conducted entirely at home by a series of governesses, reflected the gendered limitations imposed on royal women of the time. She studied multiple languages, French as the primary court tongue, along with English, German, and Italian, to prepare for diplomatic interactions. Additional subjects included history to understand dynastic legacies, etiquette for courtly behavior, basic mathematics for household management, religion to instill moral values, music for cultural refinement, and writing to align with her mother's passions. However, the curriculum remained superficial, prioritizing ornamental accomplishments like needlework and drawing over rigorous intellectual training, as society expected princesses to excel in grace and decorum rather than scholarship. Louise's innate curiosity and strong-willed nature frequently conflicted with these constraints. Her persistent inquiries earned her the affectionate yet telling nickname Madame Pourquoi, highlighting her drive for understanding and truth in a world that valued compliance. Discipline within the palace was severe, employing methods that inflicted both physical and psychological discomfort. Punishments such as kneeling on dried peas for extended periods or isolation in darkened rooms, as later recounted by her sister Stephanie, aimed to enforce obedience, but often exacerbated feelings of alienation and resentment. These practices, common in aristocratic upbringing, left lasting impressions on Louise, fostering a rebellious streak beneath her royal poise. The family's fragility intensified with tragedy in 1869, when Louise's younger brother, Prince Leopold, succumbed to pneumonia at age 9. Born in 1859 and titled Count of Hainaut before becoming Duke of Brabant as the heir apparent, his death followed a traumatic sequence, an accident where he fell into a pond, leading to illness and a failed surgical intervention. This loss devastated the household, widening emotional divides. At 11 years old, Louise absorbed the profound grief surrounding her. Leopold II withdrew even more into his colonial ambitions, using work as an escape, while Marie Henriette's mourning bordered on inconsolable despair. Louise herself experienced intense inner turmoil, later admitting to moments of spiritual crisis where she dared to curse God, to deny him, indicating how the event eroded her faith and amplified her vulnerability in an already unstable environment. Subsequent births brought sisters Stephanie in 1864 and Clementine in 1872, providing some companionship but failing to resolve the succession crisis. Without a surviving male heir, the throne passed to Louise's uncle, Prince Philippe, Count of Flanders, and eventually to her cousin Baudouin, underscoring the precariousness of the dynasty and adding to Leopold II's irritations. Amid these challenges, Louise sought solace in relationships with extended family, corresponding with cousins such as Blanche of Orléans and Maria Christina of Austria. These exchanges offered brief emotional respite, allowing glimpses of normalcy and connection in her otherwise confined life. Collectively, these formative experiences, from familial discord to personal loss, shaped Louise into a resilient individual with a latent rebelliousness, priming her for future confrontations with the rigid structures of royal existence. Arranged marriage and early married years, 1875 to 1881, from illusion to disillusionment. As Louise entered her adolescent years in the early 1870s, the complexities of European royal intermarriages placed increasing demands on her life. During this period, dynasties across the continent relied on strategic unions to maintain power balances, often viewing princesses as mere instruments for forging alliances rather than individuals with personal aspirations. Louise, growing into a young woman noted for her striking features, large dark eyes, fair complexion, and a prominent nose inherited from her father, became a focal point for such calculations. Her education, though limited to traditional subjects like languages and etiquette, had instilled in her a sharp intellect and independent streak, which clashed with the expectations of submissiveness. By age 13 or 14, potential suitors began to appear, attracted not only to her beauty, but also to the prestige and rumored wealth of the Belgian monarchy under Leopold II. One early prospect involved a possible match with the Prince Imperial, son of Napoleon III, but this evaporated with the collapse of the Second French Empire in 1870, following the Franco-Prussian War, which reshaped European politics and ended the Bonaparte dynasty's immediate influence. The definitive proposal came in 1872 from Prince Philip of Saxe-Coburg, and Gotha, her first cousin once removed and a man 14 years her senior. Born in 1844, Philip was a wealthy Austrian nobleman with extensive Hungarian estates and ties to the Habsburgs through his family's branches. The union appealed to Queen Marie Henriette, who valued the Habsburg connections that echoed her own Austrian roots, and to King Leopold II, who saw it as a means to reinforce diplomatic links amid Belgium's efforts to assert itself in European affairs. Negotiations proceeded carefully, addressing the close familial relation that required special consideration under Catholic canon law. By 1874, the engagement was formalized after obtaining papal dispensation from Pope Pius IX to overlook the consanguinity, a common hurdle in royal marriages where bloodlines often intertwined. The wedding took place on February 4, 1875, at the Royal Palace in Brussels, an extravagant event attended by European dignitaries and marked by elaborate ceremonies, including a civil service followed by a religious one at the Cathedral of St. Michael and St. Gudula. For the 17-year-old Louise, still navigating the transition from sheltered girlhood to adulthood, the day symbolized both grandeur and foreboding. She wore a gown of white satin embroidered with silver, adorned with the Belgian royal jewels, but beneath the pomp lay her growing apprehension about the unknown realities of married life. That apprehension culminated in trauma on the wedding night. Raised in an era where discussions of intimacy were taboo, especially under her mother's prudish influence, Louise entered the bridal chamber with naive romantic ideals shaped by fairy tales and courtly literature. Overcome by fear and revulsion at the physical expectations, She bolted barefoot from the room, dashing through the palace corridors to hide among the fragrant camellias in the greenhouses. A palace guard eventually found her, huddled and weeping in her nightgown and slippers, in a state she later described as more dead than alive. Queen Marie Henriette rushed to console her, whispering explanations of conjugal obligations and imploring her to return for the sake of duty and family honor. Though Louise complied, the incident left indelible scars, as she reflected in her memoirs. I am not the first who has been transported on a pink cloud during her engagement, only to be thrown brutally to the ground on her wedding night, fleeing from humanity, wounded in soul and body, in tears. Philippe, experienced and accustomed to worldly pleasures, tried to ease her distress with glasses of champagne, and by showing her provocative artworks from his private collection, including etchings and paintings of an erotic nature. Far from comforting her, these gestures intensified her feelings of violation, alienation, and betrayal, setting a tone of mistrust that would permeate their union. Following the wedding, the newlyweds first settled in Budapest, where Philip's estates provided a temporary base amid Hungary's vibrant but unfamiliar cultural landscape. By late 1875, they relocated to Vienna, taking up residence in the lavish Palais Coburg, a neoclassical masterpiece built in the 1840s that today serves as a high-end hotel. Vienna, the heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire under Emperor Franz Joseph, offered a court life of unparalleled splendor, balls, operas, and intricate social rituals, but Louise found it suffocating. Homesick for Brussels' more intimate atmosphere, she grappled with the rigid hierarchies and gossip-laden intrigues of the Habsburg court, where every action was scrutinized for political implications. Her marriage to Philip unraveled swiftly in this setting. She began referring to him derisively as Der Dicke, mocking his expanding girth and indulgent lifestyle, which included late-night revelries and a disregard for monogamy. Philippe, in turn, resumed his premarital habits of entertaining mistresses and hosting extravagant parties, treating the marriage as a convenient alliance rather than a partnership. Trapped in this dynamic, Louise sought refuge in Vienna's elite circles, where her elegance, quick wit, and commanding presence earned admiration. Crown Prince Rudolph, heir to the throne and known for his liberal views, was particularly enchanted by her lively conversations, while Emperor Franz Joseph himself teased her about her tall, slender frame, quipping that she would make an excellent Prussian grenadier, a nod to her poise and height. Yet this social facade masked deepening isolation and despair. Motherhood, which arrived in 1878 with the birth of son Prince Leopold Clement Philipp August in Vienna, failed to bridge the emotional voids. Louise felt little maternal instinct, a detachment she attributed to her own unloving upbringing, and quickly handed the infant to nurses and governesses. 3 years later, in 1881, daughter Princess Dorothea Maria Henriette Auguste Louise followed, born under strained circumstances where Louise endured labor pains, in secrecy to exclude Philippe, delivering the child alone before medical help arrived. These births, rather than fostering family unity, highlighted the perpetuating cycle of emotional distance. Louise's children were raised separately, mirroring her own childhood separation from parental warmth. By the early 1880s, the marriage had descended into a state of simmering hostility, with resentments building on both sides and paving the way for future scandals and open conflicts that would define the next phase of her tumultuous life. Unhappy marriage and extramarital affairs, 1881 to 1895, rebellion and scandal. In the early 1880s, as Louise's marriage to Prince Philippe entered its 6th year, the underlying frictions began to surface more prominently, evolving from private discontent into open antagonism. The couple's life in Vienna's Palais Coburg had settled into a pattern of mutual resentment, with Philip's lavish spending on personal indulgences, such as hosting elaborate hunting parties in his Hungarian estates and maintaining a string of discreet mistresses, further eroding any semblance of trust. Louise, now in her mid-20s, increasingly chafed against the restrictive role of a royal consort, where her days were filled with obligatory court appearances and social obligations that offered little fulfillment. This period also saw her active involvement in family matters, particularly in 1881, when she played a key role in encouraging her younger sister Stephanie's marriage to Crown Prince Rudolph of Austria. At 17, Stephanie was hesitant about the union, but Louise, drawing from her own experiences of arranged matches, urged her forward, believing it would secure Stephanie's position in the Habsburg court. Louise even facilitated introductions and negotiations, viewing the alliance as a strengthening of ties between Belgium and Austria-Hungary. However, she harbored private doubts about Rudolph's volatile temperament, which she confided in letters, foreseeing potential pitfalls in the match. By 1883, Louise's personal rebellions took a more intimate turn with the start of her first documented extramarital affair. The object of her affection was Baron Daniel Dabeling de Giesenberg, a Dutch nobleman serving as Philip's military attaché in Vienna. Tall, charming, and intellectually engaging, the Baron provided Louise with the emotional and physical connection absent from her marriage. Their relationship unfolded discreetly at first, involving clandestine meetings in Vienna's parks and salons, but whispers soon spread through court circles. Queen Marie Henriette, upon learning of the liaison through informants, pleaded with Louise in anguished letters to exercise discretion, warning of the damage to the family's reputation and invoking religious duties. Despite these admonitions, the affair persisted for several years, offering Louise brief respites from her isolation and allowing her to reclaim a sense of agency in a life dominated by protocol. The strains within her immediate family intensified around this time. In 1887, Louise and Philip decided to send their children, 9-year-old Leopold Clement and 6-year-old Dorothea, away for separate educations. Leopold was enrolled in a military academy in Austria, while Dorothea was placed under the care of governesses in a more sheltered environment. This separation, common among aristocracy for fostering independence, only widened the emotional chasm. Louise, who had never formed strong maternal bonds, saw motherhood as yet another imposed duty that robbed her of personal freedom, echoing the detachment she had experienced from her own parents. The children's absence removed even the pretense of family unity, leaving Louise more vulnerable to her inner turmoil. Tragedy struck in 1888 with the sudden death of Baron Dabeling de Giesenberg, reportedly from illness, though details remained vague in contemporary accounts. Devastated but resilient, Louise soon entered another passionate liaison that same year with Baron Nicolas Dury de Jobahaza, another aide-de-camp in Philip's entourage. This relationship proved more intense, marked by fervent exchanges and bolder public displays, as the Baron accompanied her to social events and travels. It lasted until 1893, when Dury's own marriage to another noblewoman forced its end, leaving Louise once again adrift. These affairs, while providing fleeting passion and autonomy, came at a high cost, fueling scandals that reverberated across European royal courts. Louise's behavior drew harsh comparisons to notorious historical figures like Lucrezia Borgia, known for her alleged intrigues, and Cleopatra, symbolizing seductive power and downfall. In one vivid instance, journalist Theodor Herzl, the future Zionist leader, observed her at a Vienna theater in 1890, adorned in glittering jewels and furs, and later wrote of her as Eve after the fall of man, encapsulating the public's fascination with her allure, intertwined with judgments of moral lapse. Family relations deteriorated further amid these revelations. Queen Marie Henriette, already distressed by Louise's conduct, reacted with horror to reports of additional indiscretions, including an alleged romantic advance from Ferdinand I, Tsar of Bulgaria, during a diplomatic visit in the late 1880s. In private correspondence, the Queen labeled her daughter a monster, unfit for society, and even suggested confinement as a means to curb her excesses, reflecting the era's harsh stance on female autonomy. Louise's earlier encouragement of Stephanie's marriage added to her regrets when, in January 1889, the union ended in catastrophe with the Merlin incident, Rudolph's suicide pact with his mistress Mary Vitsera in a hunting lodge. The scandal shocked Europe, and Louise, who had predicted Rudolph's instability, felt a profound sense of guilt for pushing her sister into the alliance, which left Stephanie widowed and embroiled in controversy. Throughout these years, Louise's actions revealed layers of psychological complexity. Her rebellion stemmed not from whimsy but from deep-seated loneliness and the stifling of her innate spiritedness, nurtured in a childhood of emotional neglect. The affairs underscored her desperate search for authentic connection in a world of contrived royal bonds, while exposing societal double standards. Philip's infidelities went largely unremarked, whereas Louise's invited condemnation and ostracism. By the early 1890s, as her liaison with Dori concluded, Louise emerged as a figure of both notoriety and quiet defiance, her experiences highlighting the profound contradictions faced by women in positions of privilege, yet powerlessness. The affair with Jaza Matačić, an ensuing scandal, 1895 to 1898, passion and peril. By the mid-1890s, Princess Louise of Belgium, then 37 years old, had endured nearly 2 decades of a loveless marriage to Prince Philip of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, marked by mutual infidelities and emotional detachment. Her life in Vienna's imperial court had become a routine of superficial glamour, masking profound dissatisfaction with her previous affairs, providing only temporary relief from the constraints of royal duty. It was against this backdrop that, in May 1895, Louise's path crossed with that of Lieutenant Geza von Matačić-Keglevich during a casual horseback ride in the Prater, Vienna's expansive public park known for its amusement rides and green spaces. Geza, a 27-year-old Croatian officer in the Austrian army, possessed a magnetic charm, athletic build, and adventurous spirit that immediately captivated her. Born in 1868 to a minor noble family, his title von Matačić-Keglevich was somewhat unconventional, derived from his mother's long-term relationship with a count who had informally adopted him, granting him entry into aristocratic circles despite modest origins. Unlike the indifferent and self-absorbed Philippe, Geza offered undivided attention, intellectual companionship, and genuine affection, filling the voids in Louise's life and rekindling her sense of vitality. Their romance ignited swiftly, evolving from flirtatious encounters into a passionate affair that they made little effort to conceal. By summer 1895, the couple was seen together at public events, dinners, and outings, parading their connection with unabashed openness in a society where discretion was paramount for royalty. This boldness provoked immediate backlash in Vienna's conservative elite, where extramarital liaisons were tolerated only if hidden. Whispers turned to outrage as reports reached the highest levels. Emperor Franz Joseph, the aging Habsburg ruler who prized decorum and family honor, viewed Louise's conduct as a direct affront to imperial propriety and the moral standards expected of those connected to his court. In a private audience later that year, he summoned Louise to the Hofburg Palace, reprimanding her sternly and issuing an ultimatum: end the affair or face banishment. Louise, defiant and emboldened by her love for Geza, refused to comply, leading to her formal exile from court in late 1895. This expulsion isolated her socially, stripping away the privileges of her position and amplifying her feelings of alienation. Yet it also liberated her to pursue the relationship without restraint. Undeterred, Louise and Geza fled Vienna in early 1896, seeking refuge in the sun-drenched Riviera town of Nice, France, a popular haven for European aristocrats escaping scandals. They rented the luxurious Villa Paradise, a sprawling estate overlooking the Mediterranean, complete with manicured gardens, opulent interiors, and a staff to cater to their whims. For a brief period, their life resembled a romantic idyll filled with seaside strolls, intimate dinners, and travels to nearby Monaco and Cannes. However, Philip, humiliated by the public cuckolding, reacted with fury. In a bid to salvage his honor, he challenged Geza to a duel in March 1896, adhering to the aristocratic code of the time. The confrontation, fought with pistols at a discreet location near the French border, ended disastrously for Philippe. Geza, skilled in marksmanship from his military training, emerged victorious without serious injury, forcing Philippe to retreat in disgrace and further tarnishing his reputation. The lovers' exile soon devolved into financial chaos due to their extravagant habits. Accustomed to royal largesse, they hosted lavish parties attended by expatriate nobility, commissioned custom jewelry from Parisian artisans, and embarked on costly excursions across Europe, including stays at grand hotels in Paris and Monte Carlo. By mid-1897, debts mounted alarmingly, exceeding hundreds of thousands of francs from unpaid bills for gowns, carriages, and loans. Louise attempted to involve her daughter Dorothea, then 16 in their life, by bringing her to Nice for a short visit in summer 1897, hoping to mend familial bonds and perhaps secure support. However, Dorothea, influenced by her father's side and uncomfortable with the scandalous setup, was soon pressured to return to her fiancé's family in Austria, deepening Louise's sense of maternal failure and isolation. Philippe, seeking to distance himself, published notices in major newspapers like Le Figaro and The Times in late 1897, publicly disclaiming responsibility for Louise's expenditures and effectively cutting her off financially. King Leopold II, Louise's father, already scandalized by her behavior amid his own controversial rule over the Congo, responded with equal severity. In a letter dated November 1897, he informed her of her removal from his will, viewing her actions as a betrayal of the Belgian monarchy's dignity. This familial rejection compounded Louise's emotional distress, evoking echoes of her childhood neglect and fueling a growing paranoia about conspiracies against her. Desperation peaked by early 1898, prompting the couple to flee creditors by relocating to Geza's modest family estate in Lobor, Croatia, a remote castle in the Zagorje region owned by his stepfather. Here, they hoped for respite, living frugally amid rural surroundings, but debts followed relentlessly, with bailiffs and lawsuits trailing them. The scandal reached its devastating climax in May 1898 when Austrian authorities, acting on orders possibly influenced by Philip and Habsburg officials, arrested Louise at the estate. Declared mentally unstable based on dubious medical assessments citing her moral insanity, a vague diagnosis encompassing extravagance and defiance, she was forcibly committed to a psychiatric asylum in Vienna. Jeza was simultaneously imprisoned in Graz for forgery, accused of falsifying promissory notes to cover their debts, a charge he contested as fabricated. Louise later argued in her writings that this intervention was not rooted in concern for her well-being, but in reason of state, a calculated political maneuver to protect royal reputations, silence her potential claims on family fortunes, and neutralize the embarrassment she posed. The experience exposed the precarious position of royal women in the late 19th century, where personal agency could be revoked under pretexts of mental frailty, reinforcing patriarchal structures that prioritized institutional control over individual rights. Confined in isolation, Louise endured profound psychological torment, including nights of despair and a shattered sense of self. Yet, it also ignited her resolve for eventual vindication, marking a turning point in her fight against oppression. Internment in asylums, 1898 to 1904, years of isolation and resistance. Louise's confinement commenced immediately following her arrest in May 1898 at Jeza's family estate in Lobor, Croatia, when Austrian authorities transported her under guard to a psychiatric institution in Vienna. This initial facility, a stark and imposing asylum in the city's outskirts, represented the first stage of her 4-year ordeal, where she was subjected to rigorous evaluations by court-appointed physicians aligned with Habsburg interests. Diagnosed with moral insanity, a nebulous 19th century term often applied to women exhibiting behaviors deemed socially deviant, such as her financial extravagance and extramarital affair, she was stripped of legal autonomy and placed under formal guardianship. This label, rooted in Victorian-era psychiatry that pathologized independence and passion in females, effectively silenced her as a threat to royal decorum. From the outset, Louise perceived her surroundings as a gilded cage, an opulent yet imprisoning environment where the veneer of luxury masked the loss of freedom, and later as a tomb, evoking the suffocating finality of her isolation from the outside world. In the early months at the Vienna Asylum, Louise endured profound psychological and emotional strain. Confined to private quarters that, while comfortable compared to common wards, enforced strict routines of observation and minimal interaction, she found herself cut off from correspondence and visitors. Her pleas for release, articulated in desperate letters to family and officials, fell on deaf ears. The guardianship decree empowered her captors to dismiss her as irrational. Family support proved scant and inconsistent. King Leopold II, her father, maintained complete silence, ignoring all appeals as he focused on his colonial enterprises in the Congo, and viewed her scandal as an unforgivable embarrassment to the Belgian throne. Queen Marie Henriette, her mother, initially convinced by the medical reports of her daughter's instability, sent only sporadic letters filled with admonitions and prayers, urging repentance rather than advocating for freedom. These missives, arriving irregularly through 1898 and 1899, offered faint emotional lifelines, but reinforced Louise's sense of abandonment as her mother appeared to accept the diagnosis without question. As the year progressed into 1899, authorities transferred Louise to the Perkersdorf Sanatorium, a more secluded facility northwest of Vienna designed for affluent patients with nervous disorders. This move, ostensibly for therapeutic reasons, intensified her isolation amid forested grounds that limited external contact. Here, the psychological torment deepened, surrounded by patients exhibiting severe delusions and hysteria, such as one woman who compulsively circled a sanded courtyard, muttering incoherently. Louise witnessed daily horrors that tested her sanity. She described these experiences vividly in later reflections. What terrible hours I have passed! What nights of agony! What horrible nightmares! What tears! What sobs! I tried in vain to control myself. Sleepless nights plagued her, haunted by fears of permanent entrapment and the erosion of her identity. Yet she clung to lucidity, engaging in structured activities like walks and reading to preserve her mental clarity. Asylum staff, including orderlies and nurses, who observed her composure, privately attested to her dignity and rationality, countering the official narrative of madness in hushed conversations that bolstered her resolve. By 1900, another relocation occurred, this time to the Lindenhof Sanatorium in Coswig, Saxony, a quieter, more remote institution specializing in long-term care for the elite. This final transfer, spanning into her third and fourth years of confinement, marked the nadir of her suffering, with even stricter regimens of isolation and medical oversight. Despite the mounting pressure, Louise sustained herself through subtle acts of resistance that highlighted her inner resilience. She smuggled notes to potential allies outside, risking punishment by hiding messages in laundry or under floorboards, and cultivated bonds with sympathetic personnel. Notably, Nurse Maria Stöger emerged as a key confidant. Their discreet conversations evolved into a trusted alliance, with Stöger providing emotional support and later playing a pivotal role in facilitating Louise's escape in 1904. These small defiances prevented total despair, allowing Louise to reframe her ordeal as a deliberate conspiracy. She became convinced it was orchestrated to thwart her claims on a vast inheritance, which she exaggeratedly estimated at 3,000 millions in francs. Tied to her father's fortunes from colonial exploits, believing her internment was a contagion of madness engineered to break her spirit and protect patriarchal interests. Throughout the 4 years, from the initial shock in Vienna through the escalating isolation in Purkersdorf and Coswig, Louise's experiences fostered a profound empathy for the vulnerable. Contrasting her own privileged background, where wealth afforded private rooms and refined treatments, with the powerless plight of truly afflicted patients, she recognized the shared humanity in suffering. This period illuminated the era's systemic misuse of mental health diagnoses as instruments of suppression, particularly against women who defied societal norms. Psychiatry, influenced by figures like Emile Kraepelin, often served elite agendas, labeling nonconformity as illness to maintain order. Louise's unwavering dignity amid such adversity not only preserved her sense of self but also deepened her understanding of injustice, transforming personal torment into a catalyst for later advocacy and reflection in her memoirs. By 1902, as Geza's release sparked external efforts for her freedom, Louise's resilience had solidified, turning her tomb into a forge for unyielding determination. Escape and Freedom, 1904 to 1906, A Daring Liberation. Geza von Matačić-Keglević's imprisonment for forgery, stemming from the forged documents used to manage their mounting debts, came to an end in 1902 after he served his sentence in an Austrian facility. Released at age 34, he emerged with a singular determination to secure Louise's freedom from her asylum confinement, which had already stretched over 4 years. No longer constrained by bars, Giza channeled his energy into a relentless campaign, leveraging his military background and personal charisma to rally support. He began by contacting influential figures in journalism and politics across Europe, discreetly circulating accounts of Louise's plight to expose what he believed was a grave injustice orchestrated by powerful royal interests. This period marked a shift from passive endurance to active advocacy, as Giza navigated the complexities of international diplomacy and public opinion, all while grappling with his own financial ruin and the emotional toll of separation from Louise. By early 1904, Giza's efforts culminated in the publication of his memoir, Mad by Reason of State, a scathing exposé that laid bare the intricacies of Louise's life and internment. Written in French to reach a broader audience, the book detailed her unhappy childhood in the cold confines of the Belgian royal palace, where emotional neglect from her parents had sown seeds of rebellion. It chronicled her forced marriage to Philip at 17, portraying it as a calculated dynastic maneuver that shattered her illusions and set the stage for marital discord. Most crucially, Giza framed her asylum commitment not as a medical necessity, but as a politically motivated act, reason of state, designed to silence a troublesome princess and protect the reputations of Leopold II and the Habsburg court from scandal. The memoir, banned immediately in Austria-Hungary for its inflammatory content, accused high-level conspiracies involving fabricated insanity diagnoses to safeguard fortunes and alliances. Funding for the publication came from Henri Blowitz, a prominent journalist for the Times, known for his scoops on European affairs, who provided resources in exchange for exclusive serialization rights. Blowitz's involvement amplified the book's reach, as excerpts appeared in major newspapers, stirring public sympathy and debate across France, Britain, and beyond, while Giza used the proceeds to finance further actions. The campaign's pinnacle arrived on August 31, 1904, when Giza executed a daring rescue during Louise's sanctioned spa treatment at Bad Elster in Saxony. Authorities had permitted this transfer from the Lindenhof Sanatorium for purported therapeutic benefits, but security proved laxer than in previous institutions, with fewer guards and more lenient routines amid the resort's serene thermal springs and forested walks. Seizing this vulnerability, Giza coordinated meticulously over months, enlisting trusted allies and timing the operation for maximum secrecy. Under the cover of a moonless night with fog rolling in from the nearby Elster River, adding natural concealment, Louise, now 46 and weakened by years of isolation, slipped through a ground-floor window of her villa lodging. Nurse Maria Stoger, who had bonded with her during the Perkersdorf stay and smuggled messages in prior years, provided crucial on-site assistance, helping Louise gather minimal belongings and ensuring silence. Accompanying them was Louise's loyal dog, Kiki, a small terrier that had been her constant companion in confinement, offering quiet comfort amid the tension. Louise's heart pounded with a mix of terror and exhilaration as they evaded patrols, the rustle of leaves underfoot amplifying every step. Once clear of the spa grounds, the group boarded a waiting carriage racing through rural Saxon roads toward Berlin, a journey of several hours fraught with the risk of pursuit. In Berlin, they transferred to the Orient Express, the luxurious train renowned for its opulent cars and swift passage across Europe, departing under assumed names to avoid detection. The route wound through Germany and into Belgium, where a brief pause at the border brought an unexpected moment of humanity. A sympathetic customs official, recognizing Louise despite her disguise, whispered in awe, "It is our princess, is it not?" before waving them through without alarm. Finally arriving in France by September 1904, they sought sanctuary in Paris, where Louise could begin reclaiming her life away from Austrian jurisdiction. In 1905, to counter the lingering stigma of her insanity label, Louise underwent independent medical evaluations in Paris by renowned French psychiatrists, including experts from the Salpêtrière Hospital. These assessments, conducted over several sessions, thoroughly examined her mental state through interviews, observations, and cognitive tests, ultimately affirming her full sanity and declaring the prior diagnosis baseless. This vindication, publicized in the press, represented a moral triumph over the oppression she had endured, restoring her legal competence and exposing the political underpinnings of her internment. Yet freedom exacted a heavy toll. Societal ostracism persisted, with many royal circles shunning her as a pariah, and financial woes loomed large as debts from their pre-confinement extravagance remained unpaid, forcing constant vigilance against creditors. By 1906, Louise formalized her separation from the past through divorce proceedings against Philippe, initiated in a French court and granted on grounds of incompatibility and abandonment. The dissolution, while severing toxic ties and granting her nominal independence, thrust her into a nomadic existence across Europe, shifting between modest apartments in Paris, temporary stays in Switzerland, and hideaways in Italy, to evade persistent debt collectors and legal summons. This phase, marked by precarious living and reliance on Geza's unwavering support, underscored the bittersweet reality of her liberation. Autonomy won at the cost of stability, yet fueled by the enduring bond that had sustained her through the darkest years. Later years, inheritance battles in World War I, 1906 to 1924, triumphs amid tragedy. Following her divorce from Prince Philip in 1906, granted by a French court on grounds of irreconcilable differences and mutual abandonment, Princess Louise of Belgium embarked on a restless existence alongside her devoted companion, Geza von Matačić-Keglevich. Now 48 years old, Louise sought to reclaim the autonomy denied her for so long, but the couple's lifestyle remained marked by the extravagance that had defined their pre-confinement years. They traversed Europe nomadically, shifting between temporary residences in cities like Paris, where they rented modest yet elegant apartments in the Marais district, and seasonal retreats in Switzerland's Lake Geneva region or Italy's Riviera. Despite their precarious finances, burdened by lingering debts from Nice's Villa Paradise era, including unpaid jewelers' bills and hotel tabs exceeding tens of thousands of francs, they indulged in fine dining at establishments like Maxim's, attended operas at La Scala, and commissioned bespoke clothing from Parisian couturiers. Geza, ever the supportive partner, managed their affairs with resourcefulness, pawning heirlooms when necessary, but the mounting obligations forced frequent relocations to evade creditors' agents who pursued them with legal notices and seizure threats. This period of freedom, while exhilarating after years of asylum isolation, underscored the harsh reality that liberty came without security, as Louise grappled with societal ostracism from royal circles that viewed her as irredeemably scandalous. The death of her father, King Leopold II, on December 17, 1909, at age 74, from complications of a stroke, ignited a bitter inheritance battle that consumed Louise's attention through the early 1910s. Leopold II's will revealed his controversial decisions. Vast portions of his fortune, amassed through brutal exploitation in the Congo Free State, including revenues from rubber plantations estimated in the hundreds of millions of francs, had been diverted to his mistresses, notably Baroness Caroline Delacroix, known as Blanche, and bequeathed to the Belgian state for public works, like the Royal Museum for Central Africa. This left his legitimate daughters, Louise, Stephanie, and Clementine, with diminished shares, primarily annuities and minor properties, far below expectations given the king's immense wealth. Outraged, Louise joined forces with Stephanie in 1910 to sue the Belgian government, arguing that Leopold II's transfers violated inheritance laws and family rights. The lawsuit, filed in Brussels courts, dragged on amid public scrutiny, with newspapers like Le Soir portraying the sisters as greedy opportunists exploiting a tyrant's legacy. Louise, from her exile, submitted affidavits detailing her disinheritance as punishment for her scandals, while legal teams dissected the king's secretive financial maneuvers. After years of hearings and appeals, the case resolved in Louise's favor in 1914, awarding her over 5 million francs, a substantial sum equivalent to modern millions, plus interest. This victory, hard won against state opposition, validated her claims amid accusations of avarice, providing temporary financial relief that allowed brief indulgences, like a villa rental in Biarritz, though much went towards settling debts. Personal tragedies compounded her challenges in the ensuing years. In 1916, her son, Prince Leopold Clement, then 38 and long estranged, due to resentment over her scandals that he blamed for tarnishing his inheritance prospects, met a horrific end in Vienna. Involved in a tumultuous affair with his mistress, Camilla Rebecca, a former dancer 20 years his junior, the relationship soured when he refused her demands for marriage. In a fit of rage during an argument at his apartment, Rebecca shot him 5 times with a revolver, wounds to the chest, abdomen, and limbs, before turning the gun on herself in a murder-suicide. Leopold lingered for hours in agony before succumbing. The incident splashed across tabloids as a sensational royal downfall. Though Louise's bond with her son had been weak, strained by her emotional detachment rooted in her own neglected upbringing, the news amplified her grief, evoking parallels to her brother Prince Leopold's childhood death in 1869 and deepening her sense of familial curse. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 introduced new perils, escalating by 1916 when Jeza, as a Croatian subject of the Austro-Hungarian Empire but perceived as potentially disloyal due to his associations, was interned as an enemy alien in a camp near Budapest. This separation, lasting months amid wartime shortages, left Louise vulnerable. Expelled from Austria for her Belgian ties, she fled to Hungary in late 1916, seeking shelter with distant acquaintances in Budapest amid the empire's crumbling fronts. Revolutionary chaos engulfed Hungary by 1918 to 1919, with the fall of the Habsburgs giving way to the short-lived Hungarian Soviet Republic. In this turmoil, Louise was arrested in March 1919 on espionage charges, accused of relaying information to Allied powers based on her international connections, leading to a swift trial and death sentence by firing squad. Pardoned mere moments before execution, thanks to interventions from sympathetic officials who recognized her royal status, the ordeal left her profoundly shaken, haunted by the clang of rifles and the brink of mortality. Post-war reunification with Jeza occurred in Vienna by 1920, where they briefly resided amid the Austrian Republic's instability before relocating to Paris in early 1921 for its relative safety and cultural vibrancy. That year, Louise published her memoirs, Autour des trônes que j'ai vu tomber, Around the Thrones I Have Seen Fall, a candid 300-page account serialized in French newspapers before book form. It recounted her wedding trauma, asylum horrors, and critiques of decaying monarchies, offering insights into royal hypocrisies amid Europe's post-war Republican shifts. Philippe's death in March 1921 from natural causes at 77 brought closure to old wounds, but Jaisa's passing in 1923 from illness at 55 plunged Louise into profound desolation, stripping her of her steadfast ally. Her final years until 1924 unfolded in poverty in Wiesbaden, Germany, where she reflected on wartime hardships. During the war, I have often actually not known where to lay my head, and I have suffered from cold and hunger, encapsulating a life of privilege eroded by relentless adversity. Death and Legacy, 1924. A quiet end to a stormy life. In the twilight of her life, Princess Louise of Belgium faced mounting hardships that culminated in her final days. By early 1924, at age 66, she had retreated to Wiesbaden, Germany, a spa town, where she sought affordable lodging amid her deepening poverty. Stripped of royal support and burdened by wartime losses, including the death of her beloved Geisa in 1923, Louise lived in modest rooms, relying on meager funds from her inheritance settlement and occasional aid from distant sympathizers. Her health deteriorated gradually, weakened by years of emotional strain, financial instability, and the physical toll of nomadic existence during and after World War I. On March 1, 1924, she passed away quietly in her Wiesbaden residence, succumbing to natural causes exacerbated by neglect and hardship. In her final moments, she clutched a cherished photograph of Geisa, a poignant emblem of the enduring love that had defined her later years. Their bond, forged in scandal and sustained through trials, remained her greatest solace amid betrayal and isolation. Following her death, arrangements for burial were modest, reflecting her impoverished state. She was interred at the Südfriedhof Cemetery in Wiesbaden, a serene municipal graveyard overlooking the Rhine Valley, where her grave received a simple marker inscribed with her name and dates. No grand funeral, attended by royalty, marked the occasion. Instead, a small gathering of local acquaintances and perhaps a few loyal friends paid respects, underscoring the solitude that had enveloped her end. Louise was survived only by her daughter, Dorothea, then 43, and married into Austrian nobility as the Duchess of Schleswig-Holstein. Their relationship had fractured irreparably years earlier, with Dorothea severing all contact around 1900, resentful of her mother's scandals that had disrupted her own life and social standing. This estrangement left Louise without familial ties in her waning years. Despite the obscurity of her passing, Louise's legacy persists subtly in Belgium. Avenue Louise, a bustling thoroughfare in Brussels stretching from the Bois de la Cambre Park to the city center, was named in her honor shortly after her birth in 1858. Lined with upscale shops, embassies, and historic buildings, it endures as a vibrant artery of urban life, quietly commemorating her place in Belgian history amid the nation's evolving landscape. Personal stories and emotional impact, humanizing a royal rebel. Louise's life story unfolds through a series of emotional anecdotes that peel back the layers of scandal to expose a woman of deep vulnerability intertwined with remarkable strength, revealing the psychological complexity shaped by her experiences. From her early years, the seeds of emotional detachment were sown in a childhood marked by parental neglect. King Leopold II's distant, domineering presence and Queen Marie Henriette's preoccupation with her own unhappiness created a cycle of isolation that Louise perpetuated in her own motherhood. Her relationships with her children, son Leopold Clement and daughter Dorothea remained distant. She entrusted their care to others shortly after birth, mirroring the emotional voids of her youth, where affection was rare and discipline harsh. This pattern highlighted her inner struggles with identity, as royal expectations suppressed her spirited nature, fostering a lifelong yearning for genuine connection amid the facade of privilege. As she entered adulthood, the trauma of her 1875 wedding night exemplified this betrayal of innocence. At 17, unprepared for marital intimacies due to her mother's silence on such matters, Louise fled the bridal chamber barefoot, hiding in the palace greenhouses in terror. Later, she confessed in her memoirs, "I gave my whole soul to my approaching marriage without troubling myself what marriage might mean." This incident was not simple fear, but a profound shattering of romantic illusions, leaving her bruised and mangled in her soul, and underscoring the psychological depth of suppressed agency in an era where women were pawns in dynastic games. Her subsequent affairs, culminating in the transformative romance with Geza von Matacic-Keglevich in 1895, offered glimpses of the devotion she craved. 10 years her junior, Geza embodied attentiveness absent in her husband Philippe, and their bond endured immense hardships, from exile to separation. During their enforced apartness, particularly Geza's imprisonment and her asylum years, their letters brimmed with tender longing, expressing unbreakable loyalty. Louise hailed him as a Bayard without fear and without reproach, invoking the chivalric ideal to capture his unwavering support, which transcended societal judgment and provided her with rare emotional sustenance. Even in exile in Nice from 1896, amid extravagance that accrued debts, Louise displayed quiet compassion often overlooked. In a lesser-known act, she pawned valuable jewels, not just for personal survival but to fund local orphanages, blending her lavish tendencies with genuine kindness toward the vulnerable. This duality illuminated her contradictions, a princess capable of empathy amid self-indulgence, reflecting life's fragile beauty, where privilege coexisted with profound isolation. During her 1898 to 1904 asylum confinement, eyewitness accounts from staff at institutions like Vienna, Perkersdorf, and Lindenhof portrayed her as consistently lucid and dignified, directly countering allegations of moral insanity. Nurses and attendants noted her composure amid surrounding chaos such as patients' delusions, which she endured with resilience. Friends outside, through smuggled correspondence, lauded her enduring wit and unyielding spirit even as she battled nightmares and despair. These elements collectively paint Louise as profoundly human. Her inner conflicts, struggles with self-identity in a rigid royal framework, yearnings for authentic love against calculated unions, and battles against confinement's psychological toll, echoing the suppressed agency's depths. Her contradictions, from detachment to devotion, vulnerability to strength, underscore the intricate human experience, where pain and beauty intertwined in a life defying easy judgment. Controversies and historical debates, nuances of a complex figure. Controversies began enveloping Princess Louise of Belgium as early as the 1890s, when her affair with Geza von Matacic-Keglevich and subsequent exile to Nice in 1896 ignited public and familial outrage. By 1898, her arrest and commitment to a Vienna asylum on charges of moral insanity, a diagnosis based on her extravagant spending, infidelity, and perceived instability, sparked immediate debates about the validity of her internment. Contemporary medical records from Austrian physicians, influenced by Habsburg court pressures, portrayed her as mentally unfit, citing behaviors like debt accumulation and defiance of marital norms as evidence of a disordered mind. This label, common in late 19th century psychiatry for women who deviated from societal expectations, allowed authorities to place her under guardianship, effectively muting her voice and protecting royal reputations. Jays's response came swiftly. Upon his release from prison in 1902, he published Mad by Reason of State in 1904, accusing the commitment of being a reason of state, a political ploy orchestrated by Prince Philip and King Leopold II to shield their fortunes and honor from scandal. This memoir, banned in Austria-Hungary, echoed sentiments in suppressed European press reports from the time, which hinted at fabricated insanity to prevent Louise from claiming inheritance or exposing family secrets. Detractors, including family members like Queen Marie Henriette, labeled Louise reckless, arguing her actions, infidelities, and financial irresponsibility fractured family unity and justified intervention to preserve dynastic stability. As the 20th century progressed, opposing interpretations emerged, casting Louise as a proto-feminist figure challenging gender double standards. By the 1910s and 1920s, her inheritance lawsuits against Belgium following Leopold II's 1909 death polarized opinions. Some viewed her as an avaricious opportunist exploiting a tyrant's wealth, while supporters saw her as a justified claimant fighting paternal bias that favored mistresses like Baroness Delacroix over legitimate daughters. Her 1921 memoirs, Autour des trônes que j'ai vu tomber, further fueled discourse, with critics dismissing it as self-aggrandizing exaggeration to garner sympathy, and admirers praising it as a truthful exposé of royal hypocrisies. Modern analyses from the late 20th century onward have reevaluated these events through lenses of gender and power dynamics. Historians argue the asylum commitment was not medically valid but a patriarchal scheme to silence a defiant woman orchestrated by Philip and Leopold II to safeguard their legacies amid colonial scandals. This perspective highlights how men like Philip faced no similar censure for their affairs and excesses, exposing entrenched inequalities. Her suits are now seen as rightful resistance against favoritism, and her writings as honest testimony amid limited rights for royal women. These layered debates underscore history's ambiguities, prompting ongoing reevaluations of intersections between power, gender, and mental health stigma, where diagnoses served as tools of control in an era of suppressed female agency. Consequences and historical significance, enduring lessons from a turbulent life. Louise's life story transcended mere personal turmoil, exerting lasting influence on cultural and political spheres beginning in the late 19th century. As her scandals unfolded from the 1890s onward, marked by her affair with Giza, exile to Nice in 1896, and asylum commitment in 1898, they progressively undermined the Belgian monarchy's prestige. During King Leopold II's reign, already tainted by growing international condemnation of his Congo Free State's atrocities, including forced labor and mass killings exposed in reports from the early 1900s, Louise's public defiance amplified public skepticism. Her actions, splashed across European newspapers, portrayed the royal family as hypocritical and out of touch, fueling anti-royalist sentiments among Belgian intellectuals and reformers who criticized the throne's moral failings. This erosion contributed to broader discontent, evident in the 1905 to 1909 Congo reform campaigns that forced Leopold II to cede control to the Belgian state, highlighting how familial scandals intertwined with colonial controversies to weaken monarchical authority. In the early 20th century, Louise's writings further extended her impact, unveiling aristocratic hypocrisies that foreshadowed the widespread collapse of European thrones after World War I. Her 1921 memoirs, Autour des trônes, que j'ai vu tomber, published amid the post-war redrawing of maps, with the fall of empires like Austria-Hungary in 1918 and the German Kaiser in 1919, candidly critiqued the rigid, self-serving structures of royalty. By detailing her forced marriage, internment, and battles for inheritance, she exposed the facade of noble invincibility, influencing cultural narratives that romanticized Republican ideals and contributed to the era's shift toward democratic reforms. In contemporary times since the mid-20th century and into the 21st, Louise's saga illuminates persistent mental health stigma, where labels like insanity functioned as mechanisms of control. Paralleling modern dialogues on institutional abuse in contexts like psychiatric reform movements of the 1960s and ongoing discussions in the Me Too era, exposés of power imbalances. Emotionally, her experiences teach resilience in the face of betrayal, from familial disinheritance in 1897 to near execution in 1919, while underscoring the high cost of authenticity in defying norms and the redemptive force of love, as seen in her bond with Geza until his 1923 death. Privilege provided no barrier against anguish. Her torments, from asylum isolation to wartime hunger, remind us of shared human vulnerabilities across social strata. Politically, her rebellion against gender disparities in royalty, where men like Philip evaded repercussions for similar indiscretions, continues to inspire reflections on female empowerment, influencing feminist histories that examine women's agency in patriarchal systems. Her legacy remains subtle yet enduring, embodied in Brussels' Avenue Louise, established in 1858 and now a bustling urban artery symbolizing her persistent mark on Belgian identity as a testament to individual defiance amid systemic constraints that limited royal women for generations. Princess Louise's existence wove passion with profound sorrow, illustrating that even within opulent confines, the human spirit craves liberation. She loved intensely, endured immense suffering, and documented her truths with raw candor. Far from a mere warning, her tale affirms embracing life's paradoxes, the pains that forge us, the joys that endure, leaving a thoughtful resonance on resilience and humanity's intricate beauty.